Absolutely. Here's a great, deep, detailed summary of the entire explanation you asked for, written in the simplest language, full of clarity and perfect for complete understanding. This will help you remember everything, connect the ideas, and see the big picture of how British rule impacted Indian peasants and how peasant revolts changed over time. Hashtag Deep Detailed Summary, Peasant Revolts and Agrarian Change under British Rule. Part 1. Change in Peasant Revolts, before and after 1920. Before 1920, peasants fought by themselves. Poor farmers, peasants, were angry due to heavy taxes, cruel landlords, and growing poverty. They organized local revolts using their own strength and leadership. No help from big political parties or national leaders. Many revolts were led by brave village men who people trusted and followed, like a local hero. These leaders were charismatic, meaning people believed in them because of their courage or kindness. Example, a farmer named Ramu in Bengal leads other villagers to stop paying rent to a greedy landlord. He becomes their leader, even without any help from the Congress or other political groups. After 1920, peasants became part of larger political movements. After 1920, the Indian freedom movement became stronger. Political parties like the Indian National Congress, socialists and communists started to support peasants. Peasant protests were now guided by leaders from cities or regions, and not just by village people. The revolts became more organized, with a clear political goal, like ending British rule or changing land laws. Example, the Congress Party tells farmers in Bihar to protest against high taxes as part of the non-cooperation movement. Now it's no longer just about one village's pain, but India's freedom and justice. Part 2, British rule and deep changes in village life, agrarian structure. British rule didn't only bring railways and laws, it completely changed village life, especially how land was owned and used. 1. Old system was broken. Before British rule, land ownership in villages was community-based or traditional. British brought in new systems like permanent settlement, Rayotwari, Mahalwari. These created legal landowners, often rich people or zamindars. The old, flexible system collapsed. Result, villagers who earlier had some land or shared land now became rent-paying tenants or landless labourers. Land became a thing to sell, a commodity. Land became private property. It could be bought, sold, mortgaged, or taken away if tax wasn't paid. Money became more important than tradition. Result, a poor farmer could lose his land to a moneylender just because he couldn't pay back a small loan. 3. New social classes formed in villages. Some people became very rich landlords who didn't even live in villages, absentee landlords. Others became very poor and had no land at all. They just worked for wages. Middlemen like moneylenders, traders, and tax collectors became full. Society in villages was no longer equal. A big gap grew between the rich and the poor. Farmers were crushed by taxes and loans. British demanded heavy land revenue from peasants, even if crops failed. Zamindars, landlords, also took extra money or forced peasants to give crops. To pay all this, farmers went to moneylenders who charged very high interest. One loan became lifelong debt. Result, farmers were stuck. They had no land, no money, and no hope. A new class of poor landless workers formed. As farmers lost their land, they had only one thing to labour, work. They worked on other people's land for low daily wages. They were called the agricultural proletariat, landless farm workers. Result, from being landowners or cultivators, many became like servants in their own villages. 6. Oppression came from both British and Indians. The British government exploited peasants through high taxes and land laws. But local Indian zamindars, moneylenders, traders also made huge profits by squeezing the poor. Farmers were crushed from both sides, by foreigners and by their own people. Result, British rule helped create a system where rich Indians and British both got richer and peasants got poorer. Final understanding, why all this matters. The British didn't just rule politically, they ruled over land and food, which are the heart of Indian villages. Their policies created new rules, new powers and new pains. Peasants suffered deep economic pain, which slowly turned into political anger. That anger first exploded in village revolts, and later the Indian freedom movement. Conclusion. British rule brought huge changes to village life. It broke the old system, created new classes, and turned independent farmers into landless labourers. In response, peasants first protested by themselves, and later joined hands with political parties to fight back. Let me know if you'd like a comic strip or story-style version of this, a timeline of key events and revolts, MCQ or quizzes for practice. I'm here to help you become a master at this, step by step. Here is a great, deep, detailed summary of the text you gave, explained clearly, simply, and thoroughly. Like a master teacher is helping you understand India's peasant struggles during British rule. This is perfect for learning, revising, or even teaching others. Title: Peasant Movements in India, From Pain to Protest to Political Power, 19th to 20th Century. Part 1. Peasants in the 19th Century, 1800s, Living in Misery. Who were the peasants? Peasants were mostly poor farmers. They worked hard on farms but didn't own the land. They had to pay rent or taxes to zamindars, landlords, or the British. Why were they angry? 1. High rents. Landlords kept increasing the rent. Even when the crops failed, rent was demanded. 2. Evictions. If they didn't pay, they were thrown off the land. No land is no income, no home. 3. Moneylenders' exploitation. Peasants borrowed money at high interest rates. Couldn't repay, lost land, cattle, homes. 4. Produce rent versus money rent. Earlier, farmers gave a share of crops. British changed it to money rent. Even if the crops failed, they had to pay cash. What did the peasants do? They revolted in small ways. They protested against landlords and moneylenders. They demanded occupancy rights, right to stay on the land, protection from eviction, fixing of fair rent, convert produce rent into money rent at reasonable rates. But these were mostly isolated local struggles, not united across India. Why weren't they effective? Because there was no class consciousness. They didn't see themselves as one group. There were no big farmer organizations, no link to national politics or freedom struggle, lacked proper leadership. Part 2. Peasants in the 20th century, 1900s, becoming stronger. What changed now? Peasants began to realize we are all suffering for the same reason. If we come together, we can demand better lives. This is called class consciousness. Formation of Kisan Sabhas, farmer groups. Groups like Kisan Sabha were created to fight for peasants' rights. They had better leaders, national goals, political connections. Political parties started helping peasant groups, joined hands with Congress Socialist Party, Communist Party of India, CPI. These parties gave direction, strategy, voice in freedom movement. So peasant struggles now became part of India's independence fight too. Part 3. The horror of famines, the final straw. What were these famines? A famine means crops fail, no food, people starve, mass deaths. 24 famines in just 50 years. Between 1850 and 1900, India faced 24 famines. 28.5 million people died, around 2.85 crore. Major famines: 1. 1876 to 1878, 2. 1896 to 1897, 3. 1899 to 1900. People had no food, no help, and no support. Why did these famines happen? Famines weren't just due to nature, like no rain. They were also caused by British land revenue policies, high taxes even during drought, exporting food to Britain during shortage, no proper famine relief, cutting down traditional support systems like village storage. What did the British do? They made famine commissions in 1880, 1898, 1901, but these weren't truly helpful. The aim was not to help the poor. The aim was to protect property, prevent riots, and keep control. So relief was minimum, just enough to avoid revolt, not to save lives. Final understanding, joining the dots. In the 1800s, peasants suffered under feudal and colonial oppression. They protested, but lacked unity, political support, or clear goals. Famines made things worse. In the 1900s, peasants became aware of their common struggles. They formed Kisan Sabhas. Political parties helped give voice and shape to their demands. Peasant issues became part of India's larger fight for freedom. Essence of the whole summary. Indian peasants went from suffering in silence in the 1800s to fighting with strength and unity in the 1900s. Thanks to better awareness, group formation, political backing, and the harsh lessons of repeated famines. Would you like a short story version of this, like a village tale? A coloured comic strip of the full journey? A visual timeline or mind map? Let me know, and I'll create it to help you remember better. Here's the great, deep and detailed summary of the Santhal Rebellion 1855–56 in the simplest way possible. What was the Santhal Rebellion? The Santhal Rebellion, a massive tribal uprising in 1855–56 by the Santhal community, a peaceful tribal group. It happened mainly in the Rajmahal hills of present-day Jharkhand, as the British government, Hussamand's landlords, and moneylenders who exploited and oppressed them. Who were the Santhals? Indigenous Adivasi tribal community. Lived in forests and hilly regions. Manbhum, Barabhum, Midnapur, Hazaribagh, Bankura, Birbhum. Peaceful farmers and hunters. Lived close to nature and relied on farming for survival. What caused the rebellion? 1. Loss of ancestral land. For centuries, the Santhals farmed their lands freely. In 1793, the British introduced the permanent settlement. Under this system, the zamindars were given official land rights. The Santhals lost ownership of the land they had lived on for generations. 2. Unfair rent and evictions. The zamindars began charging high rent from the Santhals. If the Santhals couldn't pay, they were thrown out. Many families had to leave their homes and shift to areas around the Rajmahal hills. 3. Hard work and betrayal. Santhals cleared forests and created new farmlands in Rajmahal hills. Once the land became fertile, the zamindars returned and claimed ownership again. They demanded rent from Santhals for land the Santhals themselves had prepared. 4. Moneylenders' exploitation. Moneylenders from Bengal and North India gave loans to the Santhals. They charged extremely high interest, usury. Even if Santhals repaid the debt many times, they were still told they owed more. Their crops, cattle, and even family members were taken away. One writer said, even after paying 10 times the loan, the Santhals still had to keep paying. 5. No protection from officials. The police, revenue officers, and judges all sided with the landlords and moneylenders. Santhals had no justice, no help from law or administration. The final breaking point. The Santhals were pushed too far. They were homeless, landless, starving, oppressed, betrayed by the government and legal system. In June 1855, 2 Santhal brothers, Sidhu Murmu and Kanhu Murmu, led a revolt. They called all Santhals to gather and fight. We will no longer be slaves. Over 60,000 Santhals joined the rebellion. What happened during the rebellion? Santhals attacked British officials, zamindars, moneylenders. They burned records, destroyed offices, and freed villages. They even declared a kind of independent rule for Santhals. The British saw this as a big threat to their authority. How did it end? The British government used massive military force. Guns, cavalry, horses, and trained soldiers were sent. Santhals had only bows, arrows, and swords. Thousands of Santhals were massacred. Sidhu and Kanhu were captured and hanged. The rebellion was crushed by 1856. Results and consequences. 1. Heavy loss for Santhals. Thousands killed. Villages burned. Land taken again. 2. Shocking wake-up call for British. First time a tribal group fought so strongly. It showed how broken and unjust the land and revenue system was. 3. Creation of Santhal Pargana. Later, to avoid future revolts, British created Santhal Pargana district in 1855–56, gave Santhals a separate area where they had some autonomy. Why is the Santhal Rebellion important? Reason, explanation. First large tribal revolt. One of the earliest tribal uprisings against the British. fought exploitation, rebelled against land theft, moneylenders and unfair laws. Voice for voiceless, Santhals, once silent, rose in unity to fight injustice. Sparked tribal consciousness, inspired future tribal and peasant revolts. Exposed unfair British system, showed the brutality of colonial policies and native exploitation. The Santhal Rebellion is not just a tribal revolt. It is a powerful story of how simple, hard-working people, when pushed too far, can rise up against injustice, even when the odds are against them. It reminds us, freedom has a price. Exploitation always has limits. Even the quietest people will roar when crushed. Like now, a colour comic strip of this? A story version with a Santhal family? A chart showing causes, events and outcomes. I can create anything for you. Just say what you want next. Here's a great, deep and detailed summary of the Santhal Rebellion, 1855 to 56, explained in clear and simple language, yet full of depth so that you understand not just what happened, but also why it happened and why it matters. Santhal Rebellion, 1855 to 1856, a deep summary. 1. Who were the Santhals? The Santhals were a tribal community who lived in parts of Bengal and Bihar, today's West Bengal and Jharkhand. They were peace-loving, mostly farmers, and lived close to nature, farming, hunting and collecting forest products. For generations they lived on their land, grew food and managed their own simple systems of life. 2. What went wrong? A. Permanent settlement of 1793. The British introduced the Permanent Settlement Law. Under this, zamindars, landlords, were made owners of the land. But this land was already being lived on and farmed by Santhals for centuries. Now they had to pay rent to zamindars for their own land. B. Zamindars exploit the Santhals. These zamindars started asking for more and more rent. The poor Santhals couldn't pay, and many were forced to leave their homes. They moved to Rajmahal Hills and surrounding plains and cleared forests to make new farmland. C. Greed follows them. Once Santhals made this land fertile, zamindars came again, claiming ownership. Along with them came moneylenders, mostly from Bengal and North India. These moneylenders gave loans, but charged very high interest. Even if a Santhal repaid the loan many times, he was still considered in debt. If he couldn't pay, the moneylender would take his crops, cattle, land, or even enslave him. 3. No one helped them. The Santhals had no one to complain to. The police, court officers and British officials supported the zamindars and moneylenders. The British government protected the oppressors instead of helping the Santhals. This made Santhals feel angry, hopeless and betrayed. 4. The rebellion begins. June 1855, Siand Kanhumurmu, 2 brothers, emerged as leaders of the Santhals. They gave a call to their people, "Let us take back our land and set up our own government." Thousands of Santhals gathered and joined them. What did they do? They cut postal and rail lines between Bhagalpur and Rajmahal to block communication. They declared, "We no longer accept British rule. This is now our own country." They wanted freedom, justice, and land rights. Though the war begins, British officials panicked. They sent army troops to suppress the Santhals. Santhals had bows, arrows, spears, and axes. British had guns, cannons, and trained soldiers. Guerrilla warfare. Santhals used the forests and hills to hide and attack. They fought with great courage, even defeating a British force under Major Burrough in one battle. But eventually, the British came back with larger forces. Villages were burned, people were killed, and women and children were not spared. In February 1856, Sidhu and Kanhu were captured, and the rebellion was crushed. 6. Aftermath. Santhal Pargana created. After destroying the rebellion, the British tried to cool things down. They created a new district called Santhal Pargana. This was meant to give Santhals a separate identity and area. But the core problems, land exploitation, poverty, debt and injustice, continued. Importance of the Santhal Rebellion. Explanation. Led by tribals, it was one of the earliest tribal uprisings against the British. Against British and exploitation. Santhals rebelled not only against foreign rule, but also against feudal landlords and moneylenders, showed unity and bravery. Despite being poor and ill-equipped, they stood up for their rights and dignity, inspired others. This rebellion inspired other tribal and peasant uprisings in India. 8. Santhal Rebellion in one simple table. Aspect detail. Year. 1855 to 1856. Sidhu Murmu and Kanhu Murmu. Cause exploitation by zamindars, moneylenders and British officials. Location: Rajmahal Hills, Jharkhand. Actions taken: destroyed rail communication lines, declared self-rule. Result: brutally crushed by British, Santhal Pargana created. Legacy: one of the most heroic tribal revolts in Indian history. Final thoughts. The Santhal Rebellion was not just about land. It was about self-respect, justice, freedom from exploitation. It was India's tribal voice shouting against colonial cruelty. Even though it failed in the short term, it became a symbol of resistance for future freedom struggles. Would you like a timeline, map, or a story version of this next? Here's a great, deep, detailed and very simple summary of your entire knowledge on peasant participation in the revolt of 1857, written as if you're hearing it from the world's best teacher who wants you to truly understand every part. Deep, detailed summary. Peasants in the revolt of 1857. Who were the peasants? Peasants were mostly poor Indian farmers. They worked hard on the land but had very few rights. They were heavily taxed and controlled by zamindars, landlords, and the British colonial rulers. What happened in 1857? In 1857, a big rebellion, broke out across North India. Many Indian soldiers, sepoys, rose up against the British. But this wasn't just a soldiers' revolt. Peasants, farmers also joined in. Why did farmers join? The peasants were already angry because they were heavily taxed. They had lost their land. They were treated badly by zamindars and moneylenders. They were also angry that the British protected the landlords and the rich, not the poor farmers. So in places like Oudh and western Uttar Pradesh, the peasants forgot their fights with the landlords, zamindars, teamed up with them to drive the British out. They wanted to end British rule and bring back Indian control. What did the British do? During the revolt, Lord Canning, British governor, announced, "Anyone who joins the revolt will lose their land." It was a punishment for taking part in the fight. After the revolt, the British changed their mind. Instead of punishing landlords, they decided to reward them. Why? Because landlords could help the British control the villages and the poor. What happened to the landlords? In Oudh, landlords called talukdars got their land back, even more power than before. Some became judges in villages, magisterial powers. Some could collect taxes, revenue powers. So landlords became the British government's trusted friends in the villages. What happened to the farmers? Farmers were ignored. Laws that could have protected them, like the Bengal Rent Act of 1859, were not applied in Oudh. They got no rights, no support, and no help. In fact, in areas like Meerut, farmers were punished even more. They were forced to pay extra taxes, cesses, just because they joined the revolt. The bottom line, main message: farmers hoped the revolt would bring them freedom from suffering. But the British punished them and rewarded the landlords. The peasants lost land, money, and hope, while the rich landlords became even stronger. Final thought. The revolt showed how brave and desperate Indian farmers were. They rose up not just against bad rulers, but against a whole system that robbed them of their lives and land. Sadly, after the revolt, they were betrayed by both the British and by the rich. Would you like this in comic form too? Or do you want a story version next? Here's a great, deep and detailed summary of the Bengal indigo cultivators' revolt of 1860, written in clear and simple language, with all key events, background, causes, effects, and historical importance. Deep summary. Bengal indigo cultivators' revolt, 1860. Background. What was going on before the revolt? Indigo is a plant used to make blue dye for cloth. During British rule, it was in high demand in Europe. British planters in India, especially in Bengal and Bihar, wanted to grow a lot of indigo to earn profits by exporting the dye. Starting in the early 1800s, many British people, including retired officers of the East India Company, former slave traders from America, came to India and took large areas of land from Indian zamindars, landlords. What was the problem? These British indigo planters forced Indian farmers, ryots, to grow indigo on their fields. But the contracts made the farmers poor and helpless. The price for indigo was very low. The farmers had to grow indigo on good land meant for food. The planters used violence, threats, and pressure to make them obey. After growing indigo, farmers had nothing left to eat or sell. Who supported the farmers? Surprisingly, the revolt was supported by zamindars, landowners, moneylenders, rich peasants, even some workers of the indigo companies. This was rare, as usually landlords and farmers were not on the same side. The revolt, April 1860. The first general peasant strike in India. In April 1860, farmers in Barasat, Patna, Nadia and other places in Bengal came together and said, "We will not grow indigo anymore." This was a bold step, similar to a workers' strike, but done by farmers. The movement spread like wildfire to Jessore, Khulna, Rajshahi, Dhaka, Malda, Dinajpur, and many other districts. It became a massive rebellion, with unity, courage, and strong determination. What did the government do? At first, they tried to help the planters, but when they saw thousands of farmers united, they were afraid of a large revolt. To calm things down, the British government made a new rule, notification. The police must protect the farmers. Farmers could now plant anything they wanted. No planter could force a farmer to grow indigo. If planters had complaints, they had to go to court, not use force. Indigo Commission, 1860. The British set up the Indigo Commission to investigate the situation. In 1862, a law, Act 6 of 1862, was passed to give some legal protection to farmers. It made it clear that planters could not force farmers. Contracts had to be fair and voluntary. Courts would handle disputes. What happened to the British planters? After this revolt and new law, many planters gave up and left Bengal. They moved to Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, where they tried to grow indigo again. Why is this revolt important? First Indian peasant movement. This was the first large-scale protest by Indian peasants against foreign rulers. It showed unity among farmers, landlords and workers, courage to fight unfair systems, non-violent protest, like a strike, years before Gandhi's time. Early example of resistance. This revolt happened before the national freedom movement began. It is proof that Indian people were already fighting injustice in different ways. In short, super simple points. Point, cause. British planters forced farmers to grow indigo, gave low payment, used violence. Who revolted? Farmers with support of landlords, workers and moneylenders. When? April 1860. Where? Bengal, Barasat, Nadia, Jessore, Dhaka, etc. How? Refused to grow indigo, first general strike. Result, British made new law to protect farmers, planters left Bengal. Importance, first united peasant protest inspired future revolts. If you'd like, I can also give you a comic strip of this event, a story-style version, a timeline with maps. Would you like one of those next?
Certainly. Here's a deep, detailed summary of the Deccan Riots of 1875, breaking it down clearly with all the important points and events. I will explain step by step in the most simple and clear way possible, making sure you get a complete understanding. The Deccan Riots of 1875, deep, detailed summary. 1. Introduction to the Deccan region and the issue of the riots. In 1875, a large peasant revolt, also called an uprising, took place in the Deccan region of India, specifically in the Pune district, which includes the area around Pune, and Ahmednagar district, both located in the present-day state of Maharashtra. The uprising was sparked by the peasant cultivators, in historical terms, who were struggling under a number of unfair conditions. At the heart of the problem were the Marwari and Gujarati moneylenders, wealthy individuals who gave loans to poor farmers but charged unreasonably high interest rates. 2. The background. Why did the Deccan peasants revolt? To fully understand the Deccan riots, we need to look at the reasons behind it. A. High land taxes imposed by the British government. The British government had imposed very high land taxes on the farmers in the Deccan region. Farmers had to pay these taxes even if the crop yields were low due to bad weather or other natural disasters. This created a huge financial burden for the farmers, who were already struggling to make ends meet. Because they didn't have enough money to pay these taxes, they were forced to borrow money from local moneylenders. B. The fall in cotton prices. After the American Civil War, during the American Civil War, 1861-1865, cotton dropped. As a result, British textile mills started buying Indian cotton at very high prices, leading to a boom in the cotton farming business in India. However, after the war ended, American cotton was available again, and the price of Indian cotton fell drastically, hoping for high profit, low earnings. This situation, and many were unable to repay they had taken. C. The greed of moneylenders and the illiteracy of farmers. Marwari and Gujarati moneylenders in the region were known for being very dishonest, manipulated accounts, and many farmers, who were often illiterate, didn't understand the terms of the loans. The moneylenders would charge extremely high interest rates and would make the farmers sign loan bonds, agreements, without explaining the full details. Often, farmers would sign papers that they didn't understand, and the moneylenders would then use these documents in court to claim even more money from the farmers. D. The courts always favoring moneylenders. The British colonial courts were not fair to the farmers. In most cases, the moneylenders would go to the court and get court orders, decrees to evict farmers from their land if they couldn't repay their loans. The courts would almost always side with the moneylenders because the legal system was designed to protect the interests of the rich, not the poor farmers. 3. The spark. How the riots started. The actual revolt began in December 1874 in the village of Kardai, located in the Sirur Taluka, a smaller administrative region in the Pune district. A Marwari moneylender named Kaluram had lent a 150 to a farmer named Baba Saheb Deshmukh. Baba Saheb could not repay the loan, so Kaluram went to court and got a legal decree, court order, to evict Baba Saheb from his house. Kaluram destroyed Baba Saheb's house in a callous, cruel way, which angered the entire village of Kardai. 4. Spread of the riots, from Kardai to other areas. The unjust treatment of Baba Saheb Deshmukh triggered anger among the local farmers and peasants. The word quickly spread, and the whole Pune district was soon filled with protests. The riots became widespread across the Pune and Ahmednagar districts. The farmers began to attack the homes, shops, and property of the moneylenders. The farmers did not only attack the moneylenders' homes, but also burned the documents, bonds, deeds, and court orders that proved the moneylenders' claims on their lands. 5. The British response, suppression and arrests. The British government quickly reacted by sending police and the military to stop the violence. The police were given orders to arrest the farmers involved in the riots. By June 1875, nearly 1,000 farmers were arrested for their involvement in the protests. The riots were suppressed, but the British government found it difficult to gather evidence against the farmers, as most villagers supported the uprising and refused to give testimony against the rebels. 6. The Deccan Riots Commission and the aftermath. After the riots were put down by the British, the government set up a special commission to investigate the reasons behind the uprising. This was called the Deccan Riots Commission. A. The commission's findings. The commission looked into the causes of the riots and found that the farmers were angry at the unfair treatment from the moneylenders and the British courts. B. The Agriculturists' Relief Act of 1879. After investigating, the British government passed a law to try to help the farmers. This law was called the Agriculturists' Relief Act of 1879. The main points of the law were restrictions on the sale of land. Farmers' lands could not be taken by moneylenders so easily. Protection from debtors' jail. Farmers who failed to repay loans could no longer be thrown into jail. Changes to the Civil Procedure Code. The new rules limited the power of moneylenders to evict farmers without fair legal proceedings. However, while this law gave some relief, it did not completely solve the problems that the peasants faced. The law was not perfect, and the moneylenders continued to exploit the farmers in different ways. 7. Key takeaways. What did the Deccan Riots show? The Deccan Riots of 1875 showed the frustration and anger of the Indian peasants against the British colonial and the unfair treatment they received from moneylenders and the legal system. The riots were not just about one event, but a combination of economic hardships, high taxes, and the dishonesty of the moneylenders. The revolt was massive and affected the whole Deccan region. It showed that the peasants were united in their struggle against injustice. Although the government took action through the Deccan Riots Commission and the Agriculturists' Relief Act, it was still difficult for the poor farmers to break free from the cycle of debt and exploitation by the moneylenders. Final summary. The Deccan Riots of 1875 were a major peasant uprising in Western India, triggered by high taxes, economic struggles, and the greed of moneylenders. The farmers were pushed to revolt because they could not pay their debts, and the moneylenders were using courts to evict them. The British government suppressed the revolt, but the farmers' demands led to legal reforms to protect them from further exploitation. The riots highlighted the deep social and economic struggles of Indian peasants during colonial rule. This is the most detailed summary of the Deccan Riots, explaining every cause, event, and outcome in simple terms. Would you like me to create a timeline, a detailed comics, or anything else for further understanding? Here is a great, deep, detailed, and very simple summary of the topic. Punjab Peasants' Discontent and the Punjab Land Alienation Act 1900, explained like teaching a beginner or child. Background. What was going on before 1900? In the late 1800s, the last 25 years of the 19th century, many farmers all across India were falling into heavy debt. They owed money. Because of this, farmers started losing their lands, not to other farmers, but to non-farming people like moneylenders, traders, or city people who didn't grow crops. These non-farming people bought or took over the land when farmers couldn't pay back loans. This was happening everywhere, especially in Bengal, Maharashtra, and Punjab. Why was Punjab different? The British were especially worried about Punjab for two reasons. 1. Many Sikh soldiers came from Punjab. They were called a martial race, brave and strong, and had a military background. 2. If these people got angry and rebelled like in Bengal and Maharashtra, it could become a dangerous situation for the British. So the government wanted to stop any rebellion before it could start. What was the problem? Farmers, peasants, were losing land to outsiders, non-farmers, paying high taxes, suffering from famines, 1896 to 97 and 1899 to 1900, trapped in debt and poverty. What did the British do? In 1895, the British government wrote to all states asking, should we make a law to stop farmers' lands from going into outsiders' hands? But only after the big famines of 1896 and 1899 did they finally take action. The Punjab Land Alienation Act 1900, what it did. This law was made only for Punjab at first, as a test or experiment. If it worked, it might be extended to the rest of India. The law divided people into three groups. Group, who they were, rights about land. 1. Agricultural class, real farmers who work on land, protected, could not easily sell or give land to outsiders. 2. Statutory agriculturists, not original farming caste, but settled on land long ago, semi-protected. 3. Non-agriculturists, moneylenders, traders, outsiders, no protection, could buy, sell freely among themselves, but couldn't get land from farmers. Key rule, land could not be sold or mortgaged from real farmers, Group 1, to outsiders, Group 3. But outsiders could sell among themselves freely. What about taxes? The British also gave some relief to peasants by reducing the tax burden. They used something called the Saharanpur rules in Punjab. These rules said, the government's land tax must not be more than 50% of the rental value of land. This helped farmers keep more income and not lose their land due to taxes. Why this law was important? 1. It protected farmers from greedy moneylenders taking their land. 2. It tried to stop future rebellions by calming down angry peasants. 3. It became a model for land protection laws in other parts of India. In simple words, farmers were suffering and losing land. The British were afraid of revolt in Punjab, so they passed a special law to protect land from outsiders. They also reduced the land tax so farmers could survive. This law was like a band-aid for a big wound. It helped, but did not fix all problems. If you want, I can also make a comic strip timeline of this explanation. Here's a great, deep, detailed summary of the passage on the Indian National Congress and the peasants, explained in the simplest way possible, like teaching a beginner or a child, with examples and added clarity. The Indian National Congress and a deep, simple summary. 1. Congress did not support poor farmers at first. The Indian National Congress, INC, when it started, did not really help poor farmers, called peasants. Instead, it mostly helped the British rulers, imperialists, and the rich Indians like big businessmen and landlords, called the bourgeoisie. So, it was like a partnership between British rulers and rich Indians, not the poor people. 2. Congress talked about poverty, but didn't fix it. Every year, the Congress said India is very poor, but they never suggested real help for the peasants. Their demands were things like expand the permanent settlement, a tax system that helped landlords, stop charging too much tax in some areas, give government jobs to Indians, Indianization, help industries grow, remove the salt tax. But they did not ask for better rights for tenants, peasants who work on land owned by someone else, or land reforms to help poor farmers in places like Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, Assam, Madras, UP, Central Provinces, or Punjab. 3. R.C. Dutt spoke about famines, but helped landlords more. R.C. Dutt, a famous Congress leader, wrote letters to Lord Curzon, a British viceroy, about famines in India and how high land taxes were hurting people. But his letters mostly helped landlords, zamindars, not the actual farmers who were suffering. 4. British Viceroy Curzon mocked Congress. Lord Curzon made fun of R.C. Dutt and the Congress. He said, the British government has done more to protect tenants from greedy landlords than the Indian Congress has ever done. Congress didn't reply to this because what Curzon said was partly true. Final simple summary. The early Indian National Congress spoke about poverty, but did not fight for the poor farmers. It helped the rich and powerful, not the poor peasants. Even their famous leaders often spoke more for landlords than for the poor. British officers like Curzon noticed this and made fun of them, and Congress had no answer. Easy example. Imagine a group in your village says they care about poor farmers. They keep saying, we are worried about poverty. But instead of helping poor farmers get land or reduce taxes, they only help the rich landlords build factories and ask for government jobs for their own people. That's what Congress was like in the beginning. If you'd like a comic strip, story, or visual chart of this summary, feel free to ask. Here is a great, deep, and detailed summary of the passage you gave in the most simple English, as if teaching a complete beginner or child. Gandhiji and Peasant Struggles. Simple, deep summary. When Gandhiji, Mahatma Gandhi, entered Indian politics, something changed in India's political and economic life. What changed? Earlier, most political activities were limited to big cities and rich people. But Gandhiji wanted to involve especially the peasants, farmers, in the freedom struggle against the British. He wanted the Congress to become a party not just for the rich, but also for the common man, especially the rural poor. So he took his ideas and struggles into the villages. Champaran and Kaira Satyagrahas, two important farmer movements. Champaran Satyagraha, 1917, Bihar. What was happening in Champaran? In Champaran, a district in northwest Bihar, the European indigo planters, British people who grew indigo for dye, were exploiting the poor Bihari farmers. They forced farmers to grow indigo instead of food crops. These British planters took high rents, gave low payments, and behaved very cruelly. This was similar to the earlier indigo problem in Bengal, like the Indigo Revolt of 1859. What did Gandhiji do? Gandhiji went to Champaran to see things for himself. He was helped by leaders like Rajendra Prasad. He started an open investigation into the conditions of peasants. He taught peasants to use satyagraha, that is, non-violent resistance, truth, and peaceful protest against injustice. Satyagraha equals satya, truth. Agraha, firmness. It means insisting on truth without violence. How did the British government react? The British government of Bihar got angry. They told Gandhiji to stop the inquiry and even arrested him. But after some time, the British government changed their mind. They set up an inquiry committee in June 1917 to look into the matter. Gandhiji was made a member of this committee. What was the result? The result was a new law called the Champaran Agrarian Act. This law removed the special taxes that indigo planters forced on the farmers. It gave some relief to the peasants from the British planters. But there was one big problem. The Congress leaders did not push further. They did not demand changes to the high rents charged by Indian landlords, zamindars. They also did not fight against moneylenders who took huge interest rates from poor farmers. So, while Gandhiji helped a lot, the peasants still suffered under other local Indian exploiters. Overall importance. This was Gandhiji's first major political action in India. It brought the peasant problems into national politics. It showed that non-violent protest, satyagraha, could bring real results. It proved that the freedom struggle was not just for rich people, but also for poor farmers. Simple example. Think of a village where rich outsiders force farmers to grow flowers for their profit, not food for their family. A kind man, Gandhiji, comes, speaks up for the farmers, teaches them to stand up peacefully, and finally makes the outsiders stop. But the village still has some local landlords who charge high rent and moneylenders who trap farmers in loans. No one fights those local problems much. Let me know if you'd like a comic strip of this story too. Here is a great, deep, and very detailed summary of the Khaira Kheda Satyagraha in the most simple words so that even a beginner or child can understand easily. Deep summary, Kheda Peasant Satyagraha 1918. Leader, Mahatma Gandhi. Place, Khaira district, now called Kheda in Gujarat. Year, 1918. Main issue, heavy tax by the British government during famine and crop failure. What was the problem? In 1918, the farmers in Khaira district suffered a huge crop failure. There was no proper rainfall. The fields became dry and empty. Most of the crops didn't grow properly. Farmers had no food and no money. According to the British government's rule, if the crops failed and production was less than 25% of normal, then the land tax, called land revenue, should be canceled or reduced. The farmers said, "We have lost our crops. We don't even have 25%, so we can't pay the land tax." But the British officers refused to believe them. They said, "No, your crops are fine. You must pay your full tax." This made the poor peasants very sad and angry. They were suffering, but the government wanted full tax, like a cruel landlord. What did Gandhiji do? Mahatma Gandhi came forward to help the helpless farmers. He knew that the farmers were telling the truth. The government was being unjust and greedy. So Gandhiji organized the farmers, taught them to be brave but peaceful, asked them to do satyagraha, peaceful protest by saying no to injustice. What did the peasants do? The farmers followed Gandhiji's idea of satyagraha. They refused to pay the tax, even if the government forced them. They remained non-violent, no fighting or violence. Many of them were put in jail. They were beaten and punished, but they did not give up. People from all classes, not just farmers, joined the struggle and supported them. What was the result? The protest went on for many months, from March to June 1918. Finally, the British government gave up because they couldn't collect the tax easily. The truth was exposed to everyone. Gandhi's movement gained national support. The government collected only 93% of the expected tax, not full amount. They had to accept that the farmers were right. Why is this important in history? Gandhiji's second big satyagraha, after Champaran, it showed the power of non-violence and truth. It brought peasants into the national freedom movement. It helped Gandhiji become the main leader of Indian politics. It gave poor farmers the strength to fight injustice with unity and peace. In one simple line, the Kheda Satyagraha was a peaceful fight by poor farmers in Gujarat, led by Gandhi, who refused to pay tax during crop failure and won. Let me know if you want a comic strip, timeline, or simple chart of this too. Here is a great, deep, and detailed summary of the Mapela Mopla uprising of 1921, explained in the simplest language, like teaching a beginner with no prior knowledge. Summary. Mapela Mopla uprising, 1921. Location, South Malabar region, Kerala, then part of British India. Time period of main uprising, 1921. Main people involved: Moplas, Muslim peasants and tenants, landlords, mostly upper caste Hindu families, British colonial government. Background. Who were the Moplas? The Moplas, also spelled Mapilas, were Muslim farmers in the South Malabar area of Kerala. Many Moplas were descendants of lower caste Hindus, like the Tiyas, who converted to Islam. Some were descendants of Arab Muslims who had settled on the Malabar coast during the 8th and 9th centuries, more than 1,000 years ago. Most Moplas worked as tenants, Verampadamdars, or leaseholders, Kanamdars, under Hindu landlords, Jemis. They did not own the land. They had to pay money to work on it. Why were they angry? The Moplas suffered from many problems under both landlords and British rule. 1. Heavy land taxes. They had to pay too much money to keep farming the land. 2. No security of land. They could be thrown out at any time by landlords. 3. Renewal fees. Every few years, they had to pay extra money to keep farming rights. 4. Extra charges and harassment by landlords. This made life very hard for poor Mopla farmers. Before 1921, Mopla resistance in the 1800s. Between 1836 and 1894, there were 22 small uprisings in South Malabar. Moplas attacked police, government officials, and some Hindu landlords. The British always called these events communal riots, blaming religion, but they were actually due to land injustice and poverty. The Moplas were fighting for fair treatment, not just religion. The 1921 uprising, what happened? In 1921, anger exploded again in Malabar. Many Moplas joined the Khilafat movement, a pan-Islamic movement, and also supported the non-cooperation movement started by Gandhiji. The situation turned violent when the British arrested leaders and raided mosques. This triggered a violent rebellion. What did the rebels do? The Moplas attacked police stations, fought British soldiers, killed some landlords, especially the harsh ones, declared some areas as Mopla rule briefly. Why religion was involved? The landlords were mostly upper caste Hindus like the Nambudiris and Nairs. The Moplas were lower caste converts to Islam. So the fight looked like a Hindu-Muslim fight, but in reality it was more of a class struggle, rich versus poor. Many Moplas believed killing an unjust landlord was a religious duty. If they died fighting injustice, they would become martyrs and go to heaven. How the British reacted? The British responded with brutal force. Thousands of Moplas were killed, jailed, or tortured. A terrible tragedy happened in Wagon Tragedy. Over 60 Mopla prisoners suffocated in a locked railway wagon. Final thoughts. The Mopla uprising of 1921 was a complex event. It was not just about religion. It was about land, poverty, injustice, and colonial oppression. Religion gave the courage and reason to fight, but the real pain came from land injustice and harsh treatment. In very simple words, poor Muslim farmers, Moplas, were treated badly by rich Hindu landlords. They had to pay too much money, had no safety, and were often thrown off the land. They got angry and fought back. sometimes violently. The British crushed the revolt, but could not hide the fact that farmers were very badly treated. Would you like this turned into a colored comic strip next? Here is a great, deep, and detailed summary of the Mopla-Mapila Rebellion of 1921, written in the simplest possible English, like teaching a beginner. Deep summary. Mopla-Mapila Rebellion, 1920 Moplas. The Moplas, also called Mapilas, were Muslim farmers and small tenants in South Malabar, now in Kerala. Most of them were converted from lower caste Hindus, like the Tiyas, and a few were descendants of Arab Muslims who came to the Malabar coast around the 8th and 9th centuries. They mostly worked on land owned by rich Hindu landlords, especially upper castes like Nambudiris and Nayars. What was their problem? The Moplas rented land and had to pay a lot of money to the landlords, Jemis. They were not treated fairly. They paid high rent. Their land rights were not secure. Landlords asked for extra payments. If they could not pay, they were evicted or punished. This made them angry and desperate. How did this unrest grow? Between 1836 and 1894, there were 22 small uprisings by the Moplas in South Malabar. These were usually violent, with attacks on landlords and British officials. The British called these communal, religious riots, but they were more about land and justice. What made the 1921 rebellion different? In 1920 to 1921, two big movements were active in India. One, Congress movement under Mahatma Gandhi, fighting for freedom and peasants' rights. Two, Khilafat movement, led by the Ali brothers, fighting to protect the Caliph, Islamic leader of Turkey, after World War I. These two movements joined together and inspired the Mopla peasants. In Manjeri, the Congress passed resolutions to support tenant farmers. Peasants formed associations in places like Kozhikode. This gave the Moplas hope and confidence. The final spark, 1921 uprising. The Moplas mixed their anger against landlords with their religious feeling from the Khilafat movement. They declared Ali Musaliar, a respected religious leader, as their ruler. They raised Khilafat flags on government buildings in Ernad Taluka. The rebellion soon turned violent, violence and tragedy. The Moplas attacked British officials, police stations, and some Hindu landlords. Many innocent people were killed. The British Army responded with extreme violence. Thousands were killed or arrested. One tragic event was the wagon tragedy, where many Mopla prisoners died in a suffocating train carriage. Main reasons behind the rebellion. 1. Agrarian land injustice. Moplas were poor, treated badly, and had no land rights. 2. Religious passion. The Khilafat movement gave them a sense of purpose and unity. 3. Political unrest. Congress and Khilafat movements gave hope for freedom and change. 4. British repression. Harsh treatment and no justice made people more violent. Final thoughts. The Mopla rebellion was not just a religious war. It was mostly a class struggle. Here's a great, deep, and very simple summary of the final phase of the Mopla Rebellion of 1921, explained in the easiest words, step by step, as if teaching a complete beginner. Background reminder. Before this part of the story, the Moplas were poor Muslim farmers, called Mapilas, in Malabar, Kerala. They had two big grievances, problems. 1, British government and Hindu landlords, Jemis, were exploiting them. 2, the Khilafat movement about Turkish caliph made them more emotional and angry. Their leader was Ali Musaliar, a religious priest and a strong Khilafat supporter. They combined religion plus land struggles, and the movement turned into a rebellion. Immediate trigger. What made them finally revolt? The immediate provocation for the revolt was provided by E.F. Thomas, the district magistrate of Ernad Taluka, who on the 20th of August 1921 raided a mosque at Tirurangadi in a bid to arrest Ali Musaliar. Who is E.F. Thomas? A British officer, district magistrate in Ernad, Malabar. What did he do? On 20th of August 1921, he raided a mosque in Tirurangadi. Why? He wanted to arrest Ali Musaliar, who was leading the rebellion. Why did this upset people? Raiding a mosque is seen as an attack on religion. This made the Moplas extremely angry. It felt like an insult to their faith and leaders. How the rebellion spread. Soon the rebellion spread to Waluvanad and Ponani talukas. After the mosque raid, the rebellion spread like fire to other areas. Waluvanad taluka, Ponani taluka. These are regions in South Malabar, Kerala. For 2 months, British control broke down. From August to September 1921, the British writ did not run in these areas. This means the British lost control. For about 2 months, August-September 1921, the rebels ruled many parts of Malabar. British orders and rules were ignored. What did the rebels do? The rebels had killed some European officers, blocked the roads, cut off telegraph lines, uprooted railway lines, and destroyed many government buildings. Let's understand this clearly. Killed British officers. A few European officers were attacked and killed. Blocked roads so that no army or supplies could come. Cut telegraph lines so British couldn't send messages. Uprooted railway lines to stop army trains. Destroyed government buildings to show their anger and take revenge. Think of it like a full rural uprising, with the rebels stopping all government communication and control. October 1921, British send army. In October 1921, the government authorities sent a strong contingent to deal with the rebellion. The British sent in heavy army troops. Their goal was to crush the revolt completely. A tragic turn. Violence against Hindus. Surrounded on all sides, the desperate Moplas, misled by rumors and suspecting Hindu complicity with the government, resorted to inhuman killing of innocent Hindu men, women, and children. Let's break it down slowly. The Moplas were surrounded by the army. They were desperate, emotional, and angry. Some rumors spread that Hindus were helping the British. Because of these false beliefs, many Moplas attacked innocent Hindu villagers, men, women, and children. This caused great pain, communal violence, and division in society. The unity of Hindus and Muslims broke down here. Final result: brutal British suppression. By the end of 1921, the government crushed rebellion, resulting in the killing of 2,337 Moplas and wounding another 1,652, though the unofficial figure put the number of casualties at 10,000. By the end of 1921, the British completely crushed the revolt. Official numbers: 2,337 Moplas killed, 1,652 Moplas wounded. Unofficial estimates: possibly 10,000 people died or more. Harsh punishment: about 3,000 Moplas were sentenced to transportation for life to the Andaman jails. Around 3,000 rebels were caught. They were not just jailed in India. They were sent to the Andaman Islands, cellular jail, far, far away, for life. Long-term effect on Mopla community. The Mopla rebellion was ruthlessly crushed, which so greatly demoralized the community that thereafter they dared not take part in any peasant revolt or national political activity till the British rule lasted in India. The brutal suppression broke the spirit of the Moplas. After this, they stayed silent, fearful, and did not join any more national movements. Till 1947, the Moplas stayed. What began as a land and religious movement turned into a bloody rebellion. Both British actions and Mopla mistakes caused great suffering. The unity of Muslims collapsed during this violent phase. It shows how quickly a political protest can become a communal tragedy if led by emotion, confusion, and violence. If you'd like a comic strip, timeline, or table summary of this too, just ask.